we're recording this too, so tell your friends. You can watch it online sometime afterwards once I edit it and put it up. Myron generates the links to it. But anyway, this was a requested community practice session to talk about some Excel functions. Folks had asked me about pivot tables and VLOOKUPs, and then there were a few other features I've discovered relatively recently that I thought were worthwhile showing to the assembled group, and we'll walk through this. So I've got a slide presentation that'll be posted on the web, on the BCT website, along with the spreadsheet that I'm using. We're going to flip back and forth between PowerPoint and Excel, as well as the video. So that'll all be online. So some of the advanced functions we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk a little bit about a handy little thing that Excel allows you to do is you can name ranges of cells, and allows you to reference them in formulas and also jump to them when you're somewhere else in the worksheet. So in the workbook. So that's a handy feature that I'll show you real quick. VLOOKUP is a way to take a table of information that you need to use in a number of different places and use a lookup to get that information cross-referenced to the stuff you need. And pivot tables, everybody's heard of pivot tables. Not a lot of people necessarily know what they are. And I'm not exactly going to give you a doctoral level pivot tables, but I'll give you the basics, and then you can start playing with it. And if we have time, and if anybody's interested, I can show you some practical examples of how I use it as the program manager on this contract, mostly to keep track of staffing and staffing metrics and statistics. Text to columns is another thing, kind of like the naming ranges. It allows you, when you take in, this was actually one of the requests. If you import information from an email, a Word document, sometimes the text is, when you copy it into Excel, it either all goes into one cell or it all goes into one column, and it becomes unwieldy. And how do you take that information, turn it into something you can actually manipulate with Excel? I can show you that. And then the last part, there's 3 parts to this feature in Excel called what if analysis. Goal-seeking application, and you can set up different scenarios and data tables. They're pretty cool. I don't use them for anything, but I thought they're pretty neat features that you might find use for at some point. So we'll start off with naming a range. So in Excel, if you just select a range of cells and then go up to the top left-hand corner where usually the cell reference is, you just type in a name. That name now applies to that range of cells. So again, you can use it in formulas, and if you're, no matter where you are in the workbook, if you do the pull down here and go to cost, it'll take you to that range of cells. So it's a handy little feature. And this is the pull down. So if I need to go look at that cost set of cells, all I do is click on that, and it takes me there automatically. It could be anywhere in the workbook. But now, once you've created these, one of the frustrations I've had in the past is once you create these, you can't just go to cost and change the range and then type in cost again. It doesn't work. It's permanently associated with that, or it seems that way. There's actually a function, if you go under formulas, there's a thing called name manager, and when you select that, you get this pop-up that shows you all the names that you've assigned, what their values are, which worksheet it's on in the workbook, and it allows you to go in and edit them, delete them, modify them, however you need to. I think you can even just change the names there and create new ones if you so choose. So that's that. Let me show you live what that looks like. if I go, so here I am in that same spreadsheet, and I pull down, go to the pull down, and say cost. It takes me, you can see it selects that range, that same range that I designated as cost earlier. So that's kind of how it works. It's really pretty simple. It's a simple little thing, but it's very useful, especially when you're talking big spreadsheets and you're going to do a bunch of operations on the same set of data. It's a lot easier than memorizing the range or finding it and selecting it. So back to okay. So next is VLOOKUP. Any questions? And this is meant to be interactive. So if you have questions or if you know a better way to do it, you won't offend me if you say, "Hey, this works better this way." So VLOOKUP, as I said, it's a way of filling in data from vertically oriented table. There's also an HLOOKUP that does the same thing for horizontally oriented data. So in this instance, and I've kind of color-coded things here, these green shaded cells are pulling, using VLOOKUP, this VLOOKUP command, are pulling from this vertically oriented table to get the prices for ice cream. And I was sort of here, I saw this in an example in a training book I had, so I thought it would make a nice example. So we've got dates where sales have happened. The salesperson sold something of a certain flavor and a certain size and sold certain quantities, and we're using the VLOOKUP to pull the prices out of the table to get the unit cost filled in for those items.
Tony, you put the formulas in first, and then you came back to this, or is it part of the on the formulas on the right side, as far as for the?
I populated this table
first. Okay.
And then I'm using VLOOKUP in this cell, and
Got it.
let me go to the next one. You can see the VLOOKUP has a number of arguments.
Oh, okay.
First is the lookup value. Actually, let me go to the next page first. This is kind of I pulled this out of the help file.
Right.
So the lookup value is the entering argument. So in this instance, I'm entering the table with size to find the unit cost for that size item.
Okay.
Okay, so that's kind of that's the entering argument. So I'm referencing in this instance, I'm pulling from this item or this cell
So, yeah.
in this VLOOKUP to go to find court and bring back $4.99.
Bring it back to where you want it.
Right.
Right. Got it. Okay.
Right. So, and there's basically 3 arguments required to make it work. First is you need the entering information. So in this instance, I'm going to a cell that contains the word court in that particular example. Right? So I enter the cell value here, if I remember correctly. Then there's the table array that has the information that I'm going to pull from the table. That's going to populate the cell that the VLOOKUP is in.
Right.
And then I need the index number for the column. So I've got a range of cells here. Right. In this instance, it's kind of simplistic because it's only 2 columns. But say I had a whole bunch of columns, I can tell it you're going to pull from the 5th column.
Oh, okay.
Right. In this instance, the number's 2,
Right.
simply because I'm pulling the cost from the 2nd
I see.
column.
Okay.
When you set it up, though, you need to remember that the thing that you're searching on has to be in the first column.
Okay.
Yes,
Otherwise it won't work.
absolutely. The number or the phrase or whatever, the value
The first. Right.
needs to be in the very first
So those were
number.
to look.
Yeah, exactly. And the last argument is actually optional. It's called range lookup. It has 2 values. It can be false or true. True is the default value. true should not be the default value, because if you use true, it doesn't always return the right value, because it just says, it searches for the closest value. So in my case, when I didn't recognize how this worked, and I was building that example, I just left it out because it's optional. Well, if it doesn't match exactly, like you've got a space,
Right, doesn't matter.
it just finds the nearest match, the closest thing, and you may not get the result you desire. So my advice is always enter false for that last argument, so you get the lookup. You know you're going to get a match in that first column. So let's go live to the spreadsheet, and we'll actually build a VLOOKUP for that bottom part of the table. So this is what, if I go to this cell, you can see, so VLOOKUP E9, so E9 is pint. It goes to the table called cost, the range called cost. This is where I used that naming a range function, and it goes over here, looks for pint, and returns $2.99. So that's how the cell gets filled. And you notice I used the false argument. So we're going to do the same thing now down here. Now we've got the sales team sold shakes on the 16th, and we're going to fill that in for them.
No.
I did. So it starts with VLOOKUP. The lookup value now is going to be what? Size. Right? So, and that cell is E10. Then I'm going to enter the lookup table, which in this instance is comma shakes, comma, right, 2 for the second column, right? That's right, it's supposed to be interactive. And then the last argument is
False.
false.
And if you ever forget how to enter it in, if you click the function key at the top, it'll prompt you through it.
Right,
To fill all the fields in.
yeah. So there you go, 99 cents. And then how many of you know this trick, that if you let the thing turn into a plus sign, you can then drag it down and it'll populate
Can
all
you
the
undo
cells.
that for a second?
Sure.
I just learned this one too.
Oh, wait a minute. Gotta get used to
If
operating
you
with.
double click on the right hand corner, you don't have to drag it, it'll go down. So if you've got 200 lines.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh. And that's value added.
Nice.
Boom.
Oh, that's beauty.
That was nice.
I'm loving it. So there you go. That's how you. So that's kind of the deal on VLOOKUP. It basically allows you to, and a practical example that I think you use, Denise, right? Is you'll have rates in a separate table, rates for labor categories in a separate table, and then when you need to do calculations using those rates,
Yep.
you can use a VLOOKUP. So that's how that works. Any questions? All righty. Next up, pivot. So pivot tables. Pivot tables are simply a way of taking a bunch of data that's in column format and allowing you to twist it and turn it and slice it and dice it a bunch of different ways. It has to be in columns though. It has to basically be continuous bunch of information arranged in columns. And headings help. I think it has to have headings, but I'm not positive about that. And a feature I discovered while I was working up this presentation is Excel will make recommendations on what pivot table you might be interested in when you create your pivot table. So first, how is it done? You select the data, and I'm going to use the very same table we built for the ice cream sales to build our first pivot table. And it's under the insert menu. It's got recommended pivot tables and pivot table, and we'll look at both of those. So if you're rolling your own, you know how to do it, you know exactly what you want, you can click on pivot tables. But if you're not sure, and it pays to look at their suggested tables. So let's go on. So this is that same, this is a pivot table built from that table on the previous page. But before we do that, let's do this. Let's select this range of stuff. Go insert, and let's look at what they recommend. So here's this is looking at the data. It came up with, okay, we can look at total sales by flavor of ice cream, unit cost by flavor, summary of total sales by salesperson, so that you can just select one of those. If they go, oh, that's exactly what I need, you don't have to go any further. You can just pick that one. So let's say I wanted to look at sum of total by flavors. I can pick that one. It gives me it's set up a separate sheet, and there I've got it now. So now this is a pivot table. And you'll see this is kind of the control panel for your pivot table. It shows you, here's the data fields I have. Right now I'm only looking at flavor and total. But if I wanted to look at quantity as well, I can drag that into, make another row that shows, okay, and you can see how many of each unit you sold. So let's look at, yeah, Bob.
So, just to connect what it did for you, specifically, where's the data that it pulled to create that table?
It pulled from the this VLOOKUP tab, that range that I selected there.
So it sorted out all the flavors and just added up all the sales for each flavor.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay. So let's look at the one that I built, because I wanted to look at flavors. But you'll notice, okay, I've got, it's by date. All the shakes that were sold on the 16th, where the heck are they? Why are they not there? Well, the reason is there's a little thing called refresh. So if you get a pivot table that you've been using for a long period of time, and there's it doesn't look right for some reason, it doesn't look updated, refresh it. And there's now the information shows up.
Ordinarily, it would refresh as you added stuff to the main.
Nope,
It doesn't?
it doesn't. No, there's probably a selection. I want to say somebody told me recently that there's a selection to automatically refresh, but I haven't looked for it,
Okay.
so I don't know where it is. But there's endless stuff you can do with these pivot tables. Let me make this a little smaller. But if you want to know, instead of by date, you want to know by flavor. Take date out, put flavor in. And now you can look at sales by flavor instead of by date. And if you want to, like I said, that pivot table fields thing on the right-hand side, when you select the pivot table, that pops up. It shows you all the data fields that you have in your table. This filters thing allows you to add, say I don't want to look at sales on a particular date. I can drag the date field in there and then filter on using this pull down. Say, okay, I only want to look at the 12th and the 13th. Okay, so you can filter out stuff that you don't want to see. Then the rest of it is kind of self-explanatory, but it takes a little getting used to. I encourage you to, make something up or take something you have and play around with it. I mean, I understand you use them a lot, Chuck. No? No.
You also have the ability, like when you're looking at data, like this is the value, but you can pick, if you right-click on the data, you can pick quantity, like sum or
Right.
total. So it gives you the ability to look at it like the count of them versus the value of it.
Right. In this instance, I'm looking at the sum of the total, but suppose I just want to look at, if I want to look at, I try to remember where it is.
The move rows is a good feature too for when you're adding new things.
I don't know that one.
Well, if you do like numerical dates or something or anything in numerical, a lot of times if you insert it later, it'll come to the bottom and you'll have to move it up. You can do it that way.
Where's that feature?
It was just on the rows, it's just clicked on. It had the move feature when you were over here on the rows.
In here?
Yeah.
Under values.
Yeah, see it has move values.
Oh, okay.
Move up, move down. Actually, if you click like,
Yeah, if I click
if
a
you're doing
row.
like sub totals, like if you're doing like individual subtasks and doing the totals, you can take it at the top level. Click on that cell and it will take the whole group of anything below it that's in that and move it up in the pivot table.
Cool.
The other thing too is when you're working on large spreadsheets, if you're not picking up the data at the bottom, you'll have to change your range. Because unless it goes inserted before that last row when you first create the pivot table, it will not pick up the range and anything
Right.
added below that.
Yeah, I guess what I've learned about pivot tables is that you have to be, if something doesn't look right, check the range that you're operating on, that you're selecting the data from, see if you need to refresh. Those are two biggies that I find myself checking all the time.
And that's like when you asked the question earlier, Bob, about where was the data pulling from. When you look at the range, it will show you the source that it's pulling from in the range that it's pulling in that source.
Yeah, and you can go to, if you're not sure where it is, there's this pivot table tools here. You can go and it will show you where it's pulling from. See, in this case, I've named it sales, so it's pulling from that range that's named. Okay.
It should be interesting when you add the new row, what it would do at the bottom, if you have to change your range on the naming convention or not.
Well, you have to go to you have to go to the, well, if you insert it inside, I think
Right.
it includes it. But if you add it onto the bottom, it may or may not, and you have to go to that
Naming convention tool.
control names or whatever
Okay.
whatever it's called to fix it.
What version of Excel is this?
I'm not positive. Where is it?
I'm hoping it's what our new one has because this is better than the last one I had.
I haven't
They
messed
just
with these in
upgraded
years and I don't remember anything on the right-hand side.
Yeah, mine's all
Well, that's what
flutter.
used to be in a table that you could move around. They just put it on the side.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you
Yeah.
click on the number itself, like 3897, right, if you right-click it, it gives you the ability to edit value field settings. And so like you can define, like whether it's sum, count, if you
Right.
wanted to put a dollar sign and like you
Yeah.
can do some formatting.
Well, and yeah, you can format these the same way you format cells any other place. So you can, format cells.
But if you do that, when you refresh, you lose it.
Right.
If you format it in the
Really?
view, in the field settings, then it'll stay.
Huh. I don't recall ever losing that, but I don't doubt it. What I was gonna
Or
say,
maybe
you
they
can,
fixed
you
it.
can go in here, say I'm not interested in the sum, I want the count. I can do that. Oh, now it's formatted as dollars, but as currency, so it's, looks screwy, but you get the point. You can look at, the information in a bunch of different ways. Max, min, product, standard deviation, so there's a lot of functions that allow you to, yeah, I guess this is the same thing. You can format.
Right, so these are obviously all for financial stuff, but for engineers, like when you've got a whole bunch, you've got a table of requirements and you've got 365 requirements, and you want to know how many of them are approved, how many are denied, how many are from which organization, right, you can get a summary, oh, here, I've got 17 from this
Right.
organization, 36 from that one. It's an easy way to do it without using equations or filters and things like that.
Right, right. So any other questions or comments on pivots? I mean, this is just to whet your appetite. You'll learn lots as you use them, and you'll be frustrated and befuddled at some point, no doubt. But you can call me. Denise can help.
There's always someone.
There's always someone who knows, and we can help or find out. I've generally got the ability to maybe, like Chuck recently was having a problem with a spreadsheet, and so I tried to do the research to figure out why it wouldn't work. Well, we found out it won't work. It's impossible. So that was the end of that. But in any case, I can help with stuff like that. I'm willing to do the research and see if we can find a solution to your problem. So that is,
I will say, once you start using them, you'll become addicted to them.
yeah. And like I said, if you're interested, I'll show you what I can give you a little glimpse at how I use a pivot table to help manage the contract. So now this next item is text columns. So if you go under the data menu, you'll see this text to columns feature. And basically what it allows you to do is you select a range of information, click text to columns, and you get this handy dandy wizard that comes up and allows you to parse out this information however you want to. You just basically follow the wizard to break up the information. So let me show you how that works on a live example. And again, I just, for a simple example, I used the names, the list of names. Well, maybe I don't want first and last name together. Maybe I need them split out. So I go to the data menu. I pull up text to columns. Here's the wizard. So I get to do, now I have to make some decisions. If I've got data that's delimited by, in this case, I've got a space between the first and last name in every instance, right? If I look at this data, I can see that. So that gives me an easy way to discriminate between the first and last name. But maybe I've got something like I saw recently somebody using this for cost centers. Those cost center codes are of a fixed length, and each field means something and is also of a fixed length. So you could use this fixed width to pick out chunks of that to spread it out into columns if you needed to. But in this case, so I'm using a character that delimits the fields, and then once I've said it's delimited, it gives me a choice. I can pick between these or some other character. If I've used, it's a set of data that maybe has a caret that's used to separate the various fields. You can use that. But in this case, I'm going to deselect tab, select comma, and it gives you an example of what it's going to look like when you're done. down below. So you can see if, did I pick the right thing, or is it hosing it up? And and then if you need to format the information, it allows you to format the columns as well, right here in this wizard. And then when you're done, bingo bango, jinga-jong jango, you got the stuff split out into columns. So it's a simple thing, but it can save you a lot of headaches and a lot of hand mashing going through and re-entering information that you've already copied into the spreadsheet from someplace. So, any questions on that?
If for some reason you need to put the data back, you can concatenate it, and it'll group them together.
Oh, is that right? That's a separate function?
Yeah.
Under text to columns? Oh, maybe it's under consolidate. I don't know.
Yeah, if you go into function, it's concatenate, which I guess means bring it.
Oh, yeah, there's a function that allows you to draw several cells together into one.
Right, it can put either like a comma, a dash, a space,
Okay,
allows you to define how
yeah,
to do it.
so there's another way of doing this. So, now for some of the fun stuff. Go back to... Goal seek. So there's this thing I found called what if analysis. So I was like, what is that? Well, it turns out that under there's 3 different functions that'll operate on a table of data. I'm going to talk first about goal seek. We're going to talk about all 3 of them. So goal seek is one where, so I used this example. Suppose you bought a hybrid vehicle and you want to compare the savings to your old gasoline vehicle. At what point, how many miles do I have to drive? That was kind of the entering problem here. How many miles do I have to drive before that premium I paid for the hybrid pays for itself? So I put together a spreadsheet that shows, okay, if I've driven 100,000 miles and the difference between the hybrid gas mileage and the regular gasoline mileage, and then calculated the total number of gallons used approximately, and then for an assumed average price of gas per gallon, I can calculate how much I paid in gas and calculate the savings. Make sense? Yeah. So, but I want to know, okay, if the difference here, if I paid $5,000 extra to have a hybrid car over the regular car, how many miles do I have to drive for that to generate $5,000 in savings? Well, if you select, you go to the what if analysis and select goal seek, you get this little pop-up. So the set cell is this one. That's the goal I'm looking for, right? So that's D6, that's this one. I'm going to set it to a value. In this instance, I'm going to use $5,000 by changing the total miles cell. So let's see what that looks like. So if I go to under, there it is, what if analysis. If I go to what if, goal seek, I say, all right, the set cell is, why did I do that? Is D6. Set it to 5,000. And I'm going to change that cell. I click OK, and it tells me, it just basically goes through, this is a relatively simple example, but it tells me that I have to drive that car for 140,000 miles to make up the savings of the initial cost of the car.
Why don't you put $1.95 now?
Yeah, right. Well, that's coming up. That's coming up.
Oh, right.
So this is kind of a spot solution, or, right? So I've looked at one particular example, and I was able to examine the goal. But suppose I want to do more than that. The what-if analysis has some additional features. So let me show you these other capabilities. Next up is scenarios. So under the same menu, I've got a scenario manager. And what it allows me to do is take results of a bunch of different inputs and compare them. So if I select the scenario manager, you start by adding your first scenario. So in this instance, I'm just saying, well, I'm going to use this as my first scenario, or the original, I should say, the original makeup of this table as my initial scenario. You can name it, and then you have to pick what cells are going to be changing for these scenarios, right? So I might want to look at, in this instance, I might want to look at different gas prices. I might want to look at different miles per gallon. What else? And I might want to look at different mileage. I don't think that's what I did, though. But in any case.
You could also put in when I die, why make it?
Yeah, right,
Make it back up.
exactly. So if I, enter those, now that I've picked those cells, I can then enter values for each scenario that correspond to those cells. And I can build a number of scenarios. And one of the neat features and we'll build a few of these. So I had the original low gas price, high gas price, low MPG, high MPG. You can click on summary and it gives you a complete summary of all the scenarios on one handy dandy table. So you can see there's the original one. I don't know if you can see it that well, but low gas price, high gas price, low MPG, high MPG, and you can see the difference in the savings based on, again, assuming the same 140,000 mileage on the car. So I think that's, let's look at that in real time. So now here's the scenario. I go up to the what if analysis, pick scenario manager, and if I look at what this allows you to do, let me just show you. Close this down a little. Oh, well, let me do that. Excuse me for a second. Little housekeeping. So,
You gotta click out of the cell.
yeah. So what if analysis, scenario manager. Once you've established these scenarios, you can hit show and it'll take you to that scenario. So high MPG, there's what the high MPG looked like, where I assumed 28 miles per gallon, still with the 325 gas per gallon gas price. So let's build one. Let me show you how this works. So if we add one, well, maybe I should go back to the very beginning and show you how I picked the cells. Would that be useful?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. Let me delete all these. So, okay, I'm going to add my first scenario. We'll call this one original. Now I have to pick what cells are going to be changing. So, I want to look at scenarios where I vary the price of gas. And I want to look at scenarios where I vary the price or the average MPG that I'm getting in the vehicle. Let's do it. So what I'm doing is I'm holding down the control key to add those two scenarios. There was some reason why I had to add the total miles, but I'm not positive why. But let me add it anyway. All right, so that's how I add the cells that are going to be. Oh, what happened to the original? I say OK. And there's so when I add a scenario, I'm going to go in and change these values. So that's the original one. When I say add, now the name is going to be high MPG. And I'm going to say, okay, for the same mileage and the same gas price, I'm going to say I got 32. Okay. Add another one for low gas price. I'll change this to $2.99. And now I can say summary. And there it is. Shows the different values for the savings based on those different scenarios. And you can make as many as you want. And so it allows you to examine a bunch of different scenarios, hence the name, for a particular situation. Questions? Got it?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool feature. Now, if you like that, you're really going to like the next one. Let me take you to data table. So the next one's called data tables. Basically, what this allows you to do is look at, whereas that scenario, you can pick and make up as many scenarios as you want, but they're kind of all displayed separately. This allows you to look at a whole bunch of different scenarios all in one table at one time. So the first thing you have to do is set up your formula. Now, in this instance, that's not the cell that's selected. Let me see if basically at the upper leftmost poor cell of the table that has all the values you're going to examine, you need the formula that's going to be used to calculate everything in the table. And basically what you're doing is, in this instance, I set up the table variables are miles per gallon and gas price. So I took a whole bunch of different values for each of those, laid them out in the table, and then I used basically this table to figure out that formula, and I'll show you when we go live. Then you take that once you've set up the table, you go under the data menu to data table, and you get that pop-up that says, okay, what's the row input cells? What's the column input cells? And of course, like everything, they're reversed. The row input you would think would be the column input is what you would think that would be the row input. So in this instance, I'm calculating, again, I'm still calculating savings. So what's going to be filled in here is dollars and cents. I've got gas price across the top, and that corresponds to this cell in the formula. And so that goes to the row input. It's arranged in columns, but it's the row input. The MPG values are arranged in a column, and it's the column input. They're arranged by rows in a column, it's the column input. If you do it wrong, it just comes up nonsensical, so it's pretty easy to figure out, but it's not necessarily intuitive. So let's look at it, what it looks like in real time. So we go to the what if analysis, data table. Oh, never mind. I need to show you this, the formula first. So what I did was I picked out of this table the stuff I needed to calculate the dollar savings. So it's D4 times C5. D4 is the total gallons times C5, which is the price of gas, minus C4 times C5. So it's this times that minus this times that. And then subtract the two to get this savings of 3,500, whatever it is under the cursor there. Okay? So I put that in this cell. Now we can use the under what if analysis data table. And the row input cell now is going to be, what did I say the row input was? The rows is by column, so that's this one. If not, we'll see it. And then column input is the miles per gallon. And again, this is all assuming, I'm comparing to a vehicle that gets 19 miles per gallon. Hit OK. Oh, okay, I forgot. You have to select the table to select the cells of the table that you're using. Then you go to what if, data table, and that's the row input, that's the column input. You hit OK, and bingo bango, it populates the whole table based on this information on the two sides. Pretty cool, huh? Mm-hmm. Now, but it's a live table. So let's say I decide that, I don't really want to compare to a vehicle that gets 19 miles per gallon. I need to compare to one that gets 11. The whole table changes. So as long as you're using, a formula that reverts to a table, if there's other parameters you want to adjust, you can do that and see the effect on the data. So there you go. Any questions on this? Again, I think these are pretty powerful tools. This whole what if analysis thing I thought was worth talking about. It's got a lot of power, a lot of capability in there.
Sorry, I missed the first part. Is there tutorials that you can go into these and work through?
Where I found some of the best help was just searching YouTube. And there's folks on there with the data tables one I couldn't figure out.
Yeah.
There was a YouTube video that showed how to do it.
Wow. Cool. Like
So
Ralph Hendricks is supposed to be a real expert.
yeah, no, well, and that's true. I mean, I'm a neophyte. really, when it comes to using Excel. But we've got guys like John Olson, Ralph Hendricks. These guys are like super experts. They program it. They do all kinds of really fancy stuff with it. I know enough to get by, and I learned a few things for this, so that was useful and fun. But that's that. Any questions? All right. Well, thanks for coming. If